Governing is as much about marketing yourself and your team as it is about actual policy. After all, nobody's going to accept your policy prescriptions if you're no good at selling your vision in the first place. It's an area the Liberal Party has traditionally sucked at, with the Victorian branch in particular utterly incapable of developing a compelling narrative at any point this century. But Prime Minister ScoMo has changed all that, having form on account of a previous life in the corporate world as an ad man. His subsequent efforts in Parliament have earned him the friendly neighbourhood moniker Scotty from Marketing, courtesy of the Batuta Advocate, which is only made funnier by virtue of how much he clearly hates the name. But if you thought even for a moment that our PM was the only politician more interested in form over function, think again. It's one of the quirks of the current era that despite each and every one of us having access to more information than ever before, the people in charge have dumbed down their message so much that if it doesn't fit into a 3-word slogan, it may as well not exist. And nowhere is this lowest common denominator politics more prevalent than right here in the state of Victoria. For just one example, speed limits are constantly being reduced, despite modern cars and roads being safer than at any point in human history. And this applies even on roads with not a skerrick of accident history. Why? Well, because eventually there will be one person who just can't handle that wide sweeping corner at 70 k's an hour or dead straight paved country road at 90. So council bureaucrats, blunt hammers that they are in search of nails of ever decreasing size, see it as their moral duty to step in and modify our behaviour on account of society's least competent, which is entirely ignorant of the fact that the state really shouldn't be issuing licences to people unable to control the deadly weapons that are motor vehicles. But while city and shire officials have certainly earned their reputation as both overzealous and risk-averse, don't let the states off the hook for this phenomenon. No. State government officials are solely concerned with the message, as the coronavirus crisis in Victoria has demonstrated beyond any doubt. Top health bureaucrats admitting a big part of the reason for a curfew and 5-kilometre travel restrictions is to shock and awe the public into behaving as if micromanaging every aspect of the lives of Australian citizens were the reason they got into the industry in the first place. A compassionate, virtuous and extremely white deputy showing her maximum levels of care for Aboriginal Aussies by comparing the arrival of British settlers to COVID-19, without so much as a word about the mental health crisis caused by her recommendations to the Victorian government. And, lest you forget, the hyper-focus on the deaths of 2 people in their 30s and 1 in their 20s, designed not to convey any semblance of statistical reality, but to ensure that the old and young alike are literally cowered into submission, living in fear of a virus that will be with us for the rest of time. And then there's Queensland's amorphous definition of quote-unquote hotspots. The Queensland government just days ago declared the Australian Capital Territory to be a coronavirus hotspot, closing its borders to Canberra residents, I would argue illegally, even though they've been free of community transmission for ages. Why? Well, because one guy from New South Wales drove to Canberra and then flew up to Brisbane. He wasn't infected, he just wanted to get back to work in Cairns. So if you really believe that's a health measure and nothing to do with the coming state election, you haven't been paying attention. There are more active cases in metropolitan Brisbane than the entire ACT, but according to Anastasia and her band of go back to where you came from bigots, the nation's capital is the COVID-19 frontline. Even the feds are getting in on this shit, with the Therapeutic Goods Administration, Australia's FDA, declaring hydroxychloroquine to be a poison and prohibiting new prescriptions, not because the drug is even remotely poisonous when used properly, but in order to manage increased demand. That's like simply declaring toilet paper to be lead-coated chips of glass in order to prevent panic buying. It's a lie designed to change your behaviour. If we can't trust governments at any level to actually be honest with us as the governed, how on earth can they expect us to meekly comply with ever more draconian restrictions on movement, speech, and life in general? What do they expect to happen when they've been lying to us all along just so we're more likely to comply with their demands? Oh, sorry, let me rephrase that for Dan's Facebook army. My freedoms. This is pure and simple dog whistle politics, the politics of fear, and it's got absolutely nothing to do with the minor inconvenience of wearing a mask or a proportionate response to a pandemic that threatens to spin out of control. How else would you describe governments, politicians, and bureaucrats going far beyond just obscuring the truth by presenting incomplete stats? It's not a physical threat, but it is an attack on the truth, an assault on objective reality in order to reinforce their own ability to control the way we live our lives and thus the situation. This doesn't mean the pandemic's not serious. It doesn't mean the virus is not deadly, and it doesn't even mean that some of these draconian government restrictions that will likely carry on well into next year weren't effective at saving lives. But a leader's greatest tool in times of crisis is trust from the people they lead. And here in Australia, they've thrown it away.